Happy birthday, Malcolm.
What is this?
Your divorce papers.
You served me here?
I wanted witnesses. And before anyone gets sentimental, the Harrow sale closes at midnight. So does the acquisition.
I kept my hand beneath the table.
Don't sell that car, Claire.
Why? Afraid they'll inspect the car you certified? Malcolm, where did you get Amos Bell's punch? That old thing? He carries junk when he's nervous.
If that Harrow crosses the block tonight, you cannot undo what happens next.
Good. Neither can you.
She handed the microphone straight to the gala host before I could answer her, and the band picked the moment to start again, like nothing had happened. 200 people in black tie went back to their champagne as if a woman hadn't just ended a 31-year marriage between the cake and the coffee service. That was the point. Claire never did anything in front of a crowd by accident. A man in a security jacket touched my elbow before I'd even stood up all the way. "Mr. Reed, I need your badge." I looked down at the lanyard around my neck, the one that had opened the Restoration Bay doors for 3 decades. "Excuse me?" "Workshop access is suspended pending the acquisition close. Mrs. Reed's instructions." So this hadn't started tonight. This had started before the cake was cut, before the band played, maybe before I'd put on the jacket. Claire didn't improvise humiliation. She scheduled it. I walked toward the stage anyway, past the velvet rope and the little brass placard that read, "The Harrow 12, Centerpiece Lot." And I looked at the car I'd once put my name on. Claire stepped into my path with the kind of calm that only comes from rehearsal. "You already certified it once." 4 words. She said them like a door closing. My sister found me before I could answer that either. Denise didn't look angry. She looked tired, which was worse. "Malcolm, please don't make a scene tonight." "I don't want a scene. I want 10 minutes with the passenger side frame." "If you think something's wrong, tell me exactly what. No speeches." I didn't have an answer yet, not one she'd accept. All I had was a feeling, and feelings don't hold up in a room full of investors. The buyers' people were already moving toward the closing table near the west wall, and somewhere past midnight, whatever they signed there would be permanent. Once that ink dried, I'd lose my access, my vote, and any right to ask a single question about a car with my signature already attached to its history. I stood close enough to study the Harrow's inner panel. The one Amos Bell, my mentor, dead 6 years now, used to leave with a particular, honest unevenness, the kind that told you a human hand had shaped it. Under the gala lights, that panel looked wrong. Too smooth, too finished, not proof, just enough. "That's not the car I signed," I told Denise. "Then prove it before midnight," she said, and walked away before I could ask her to help me do it. I hadn't touched a wrench in this building in over a year. That was supposed to be my choice. Tonight, it felt like someone else had made it for me. My wife and I built Reed Heritage Motors together, back when we still finished each other's sentences instead of each other's careers. I handled the machines. Claire handled the room. For a long time, that division felt like a marriage instead of a business model. She could walk into any collector's parlor and leave with a signature on a contract. I could look at a frame weld from across a shop floor and tell you the decade it was made in. We were good at different things, and for years, that was enough. It stopped being enough after the alderman scandal. Payroll had been tight that quarter. Claire came to me with numbers, not threats. She never needed threats, and told me a delayed delivery could cost 4 craftsmen their jobs before the holidays. I signed the authentication certificate before I'd finished the final inspection. 2 months later, an outside appraiser found replacement components nobody had disclosed. Claire handled the press. I accepted the responsibility, publicly, completely, and I never once told my sister that Claire had been the one standing over my shoulder when I picked up the pen. I thought silence was protection. I have had a year to learn what it actually was. Claire's people had already moved the harrow behind a rope line by the time I circled back to the restoration bay doors, and my badge, predictably, didn't open them. "Ma'am's orders," the young tech said, not meeting my eyes. "Anybody who helps you tonight risks their position after the transition." That told me something, too. Claire wasn't just protecting a sale. She was making sure nobody in this building could afford to be honest with me. I found Eleanor Shaw near the champagne table, still holding her glass like she'd forgotten it was in her hand. "If Amos finished a car," I asked her, "where would he have marked it?" She studied me a long moment before she answered. "I verify metal, Malcolm. I don't verify marriages." Fair, but she didn't walk away. "That's Amos's punch," she said finally, nodding at my closed fist. "Brass, worn smooth on the grip. Small crescent chip on the striking face from a fall he had back in the 90s. He used to leave a mark on the hidden frame tab after a final inspection. Nobody photographed it, nobody wrote it down. He didn't do it for buyers. He did it for himself." "Why?" "Because he told me once that paint can lie and chrome can lie, but a craftsman still has to leave something honest underneath." She looked past me toward the harrow. "If that car has his mark, it's the same car you signed off on. If it doesn't..." She didn't finish that sentence. She didn't need to. I went looking for Denise again, and this time I didn't ask her to believe me. "Pull the catalog photos," I said. "Compare them to the archived shop images from the original restoration. That's measurable. That's not a feeling." She didn't say yes. She didn't say no either. She pulled her phone out and started scrolling, and for the first time all night, she wasn't looking at me like I was the problem in the room. "The passenger side sill," she said quietly a minute later. "It's different. The stitching pattern on the panel edge doesn't match." "Does that mean I'm right?" "It means you're not crazy," she said. "That's all I'm giving you tonight." It was more than I'd had an hour ago. The chance came during a scheduled lighting adjustment, when the crew rolled the harrow a few feet off its display mark to reposition the spotlight. I couldn't get past the rope. Denise could. "I'm not doing an investigation," she warned me. "I'm taking one photograph." She crouched by the undercarriage for maybe 15 seconds and came back with her phone held out like it was something that might bite her. No crescent mark on the frame tab. Clean replacement metal where Amos's stamp should have been. A fastener style I didn't recognize from any restoration our shop had done in that era. It confirmed something had changed. It didn't tell me who changed it, or when, or why the public identification plate still read like the car I remembered. That was the part that scared me more than the missing mark. If the plate was real and the frame underneath it wasn't, then Reed Heritage Motors wasn't just selling a car tonight. It was selling a story about a car and calling it provenance. Claire noticed Denise and me huddled near the rope line, heads together, and I watched her adjust course in real time. She didn't come toward us. She walked toward the microphone instead. "I want to say something about legacy," she told the room, and the room quieted the way rooms do for a woman who sounds certain. "Companies like ours don't die because the market changes. They die because founders confuse nostalgia with integrity. They'd rather protect a feeling than protect a future." She never said my name. She didn't have to. Half the room turned to look at me anyway. It was a good speech. That was the problem. She wasn't wrong about everything. I had spent the last year hiding in a workshop instead of leading a company, and everyone in that room knew it. Claire hadn't invented my flaw. She'd just found the exact right moment to use it. I felt something tighten in my chest that had nothing to do with the harrow. She had turned my worst year into her best argument, and she'd done it without lying once. The certainty I'd been chasing all night finally arrived. The car had been altered. I was sure of it now. And in the same breath, Claire announced that the buyer's team wanted to move the closing ceremony earlier inside the midnight window. My time, already short, got shorter. I stood there with a photograph on a borrowed phone and a question I couldn't yet answer. Who had access to that car after I certified it? I asked Denise to check the vehicle movement logs. She refused before I'd finished the sentence. "That's a direct violation of Claire's instructions. I'd be flagged the second I opened that file." "I'm not asking you to lie for me. I'm asking you to look." "You don't get to ask me for loyalty tonight, Malcolm." Her voice cracked on my name just slightly. "Not after the year you gave me." That stopped me. What does that mean? "It means, after Alderman, I needed you to tell me what happened, not the press release, the truth. And you disappeared into that workshop and let Claire answer every question I had for a year, while I ran payroll meetings not knowing if my own brother had done something criminal or just something stupid." "It wasn't criminal." "I know that now. I didn't know it then because you never told me." She crossed her arms. "Claire stayed. Claire explained. Claire kept this company alive while you polished fenders and wouldn't answer your phone. From where I stood, you chose pride over family." I didn't defend myself completely because I couldn't. "I thought taking the blame kept all of you safe." "It kept us ignorant," she said, "and there wasn't any cruelty in it, just exhaustion." I told her the rest, finally, the part I'd never said out loud to her. Claire came to me before I signed that certificate, told me a delay could cost 4 people their jobs before the holidays. I signed before I finished the inspection. "Did she hold your hand and make you do it?" "No." "Then you signed it?" "Yes." She let that sit between us for a second. "At least that's honest." For a moment, neither of us said anything else. The band was still playing somewhere on the other side of the wall, muffled and cheerful, completely indifferent to what was happening in this corridor. I thought about all the quiet dinners over the past year, where Denise had asked careful, sideways questions about the company, and I had answered every one of them briefly and politely. always leaving out the one detail that might have actually helped her understand. I had told myself I was sparing her. I had really just been sparing myself the look on her face. She remembered something then. I could see it cross her face. How after Alderman, Claire had used the scandal to centralize every authentication decision under her own office. At the time, it had looked responsible, a steady hand after a mistake. Tonight, standing here, it looked like something else entirely. She didn't tell me she'd help. She walked away toward the operations office without another word, and I had no idea for 10 long minutes whether she was going to check the movement logs or report me for asking. She came back, holding her phone against her chest like it was fragile. "The Harrow left secure storage 5 months ago," she said quietly. "A branding shoot. 3 hours, off the books, off the regular schedule. Claire personally authorized the movement. Denise, the system logs who accesses those records. She'll know I looked within the hour." I held the brass punch in my closed hand, and for just a second, I wasn't at a gala at all. I was 17 years old, standing in Amos Bell's shop while he told me a restored machine should never pretend to be something it wasn't. He'd have hated this room. All of it. "There's a photography contractor," Denise added, "shot behind-the-scenes footage during that branding session. I don't have access to his private archive tonight. I just know he exists." That was enough to establish opportunity. It wasn't enough to end the story, and I didn't ask her to chase it further. Claire found her within the hour, exactly as predicted, but she didn't threaten her. She was smarter than that. "Your brother can survive losing a room," I heard her tell Denise near the bar, her voice pitched just for the two of them, except I was close enough. "You cannot afford to lose your future because he suddenly wants his past back. The acquisition guarantees you senior operations. Don't let him take that from you too." It was a good argument. Claire's arguments were always good. That was what made her dangerous. "I'm not on your side," Denise told me afterward, flat, final. "I didn't ask you to be," I said. "I asked you to be on the car's side." She looked at me a long moment, something shifting behind her eyes that I couldn't name yet. Then she agreed to formally request an independent inspection before the auction proceeded. Not because she trusted me, she made that very clear, but because a board officer raising a documented authenticity concern was, under our own bylaws, enough to require one. For the first time all night, I had something more than a feeling. I had physical suspicion, evidence of unexplained movement, and a board-level officer willing to put her name on a request. It felt, for about 4 minutes, like enough. Denise invoked the procedure formally, standing in front of the buyer's representatives instead of just me. Under our own bylaws, a board officer's documented authenticity concern was enough to require independent verification before any closing could proceed. Eleanor Shaw agreed the concern met the threshold. Claire couldn't dismiss it outright without looking like she had something to hide. The Harrow came off the auction queue. The buyer's team paused the closing table conversation. I watched 2 of them exchange a look I recognized, the kind investors give each other when a sure thing stops being sure. For the first time all night, Claire's composure slipped. Just a flicker. Just enough for me to see it. Collectors near the stage started murmuring, asking why the flagship lot had been pulled. Denise stood next to me, not touching my arm, not smiling, but standing there. "Let Eleanor inspect it. she told Claire, in front of enough people that Claire couldn't argue without an audience watching her argue. Eleanor looked at the photograph on Denise's phone and said only that the metalwork deserved a closer look. Not that I was right, just that the question was legitimate. That was enough for the room. Buyers don't need certainty. They need doubt removed. I let myself believe for a few minutes that the process itself would protect the truth. That was my mistake. And it was an old one. I've always trusted procedure more than confrontation, because procedure doesn't require me to raise my voice. I told Eleanor exactly which section I wanted opened. The passenger side frame, low behind the sill panel. I said it loud enough that Claire, 3 feet away, heard every word. She looked at the photograph, then at me. Then she smiled, and I understood, 1 beat too late, what I had just handed her. "Thank you," she said. "Now I know exactly what you think you found." She excused herself from the group with the kind of calm that should have warned me faster than it did. 10 minutes later, she was back with a folder I recognized before she opened it. My old authentication certificate. My signature, unmistakable, at the bottom of a page that had once ended a scandal and apparently had been sitting in a drawer waiting to end something else. "The board should know," Claire announced, no longer to Denise, no longer to me, but to the room, that the man attempting to halt tonight's sale based on personal suspicion is the same man who has a documented history of authenticating a vehicle he hadn't fully inspected during his own divorce proceedings. The company's emergency counsel didn't take long to reach a verdict. My challenge, they said, created a conflict of interest too significant to ignore. My inspection request was suspended, pending formal review. Denise's records access was frozen in the same motion, effective immediately. Claire handed the old scandal file to 2 reporters near the bar before I'd finished absorbing what had just happened. Within minutes, the mood in that room had turned all the way around. I was no longer a concerned craftsman. I was a bitter husband trying to sabotage his wife's deal on the night she'd left him. "You didn't tell me she could do that," Denise said, and there was real anger in it now, not exhaustion. "You knew that certificate existed. You let me put my name on this without warning me. I didn't think—" "That's the problem, Malcolm. You never think I need the whole story until it's too late to use it." She walked away, and this time I understood I wasn't getting her back with an apology. Security moved the Harrow into a sealed staging area before I could ask anyone to stop them. My badge, of course, still didn't work. The closing resumed. Midnight held its position on the ballroom clock, like it hadn't heard any of this. I sat down in a service corridor behind the kitchen, away from the music, away from the applause that kept rolling in through the wall every time someone made a toast I wasn't part of. I had lost the photograph's credibility. I had lost my access to the car. I had lost my sister's trust twice in the same night. I had lost the institutional standing to even ask another question. And I had lost it all because I tried to win quietly, the way I always try to win, hoping the truth would simply be recognized without my having to say the harder thing first. I took the brass punch out of my pocket and set it on the crate beside me. Then I picked it back up. I had spent a year believing that silence protected the people I loved. Tonight, it had protected a lie instead. and I was the one who'd kept feeding it oxygen. I didn't need to prove Claire had lied about everything. I needed to stop lying by omission about myself. Private proof was finished. Claire had shown me that. Any document I found she could match with one of her own, and she had a drawer full of my old mistakes to draw from. If I wanted the truth to survive contact with that room, it couldn't depend on paper anymore. It had to depend on something Claire couldn't file away. My new goal wasn't to prove she had altered the Harrow in private. It was to force the car to answer the question in public, where her own need to control the narrative would work against her instead of for her. I asked the gala host for 2 minutes on stage before the featured lot went up. Denied, politely, firmly. I found the buyer's lead representative instead, a woman named Farrow, who had spent the whole night watching everything with the careful neutrality of someone whose job depended on not picking sides. "I'm not asking you to trust me," I told her. "I'm asking you to ask my wife one question before you sign anything. Ask her to guarantee out loud in front of this room that the car on that stage is the same physical vehicle described in its own catalog." Farrow studied me. "Why would she refuse that?" "She won't refuse. That's the point. She'll say yes because saying no would kill the deal, faster than any accusation I could make. And once she says yes, in front of everyone, she's guaranteed something I can test." It wasn't a trap built from paperwork. It was a trap built from Claire's own certainty, the thing that had never once failed her before tonight. I found Denise again, away from the crowd this time, and I told her the rest of the story. All of it. The part I'd never given her. "Claire pressured me before I signed that old certificate. That's true. But I chose to sign it. She didn't make my hand move. If I get up there tonight, I'm going to say that before she gets the chance to use it against me again." "Why now?" Denise's voice was careful, guarded, but she was listening. "Because being ashamed of the truth gave her more power over me than the truth itself ever could have. She didn't forgive me. I want to be honest about that, because a night like this doesn't erase a year like that one." "I needed that answer years ago," she said. "I know." No embrace, no easy reconciliation. Just two people standing a little closer than they had been an hour earlier. She told me, quietly, that she'd seen the log. Claire had personally authorized the Harrow's unscheduled movement 5 months earlier. She'd say so publicly if I asked her to. Doing that would cost her the senior position the acquisition had promised her. "You don't owe me that," I said. "This isn't for you," she answered, and that was the end of the conversation. The auctioneer announced a few minutes later that the Harrow 12 would be the final featured lot before midnight closing. The room applauded like that was good news. I walked back into the ballroom with no badge, no board authority, and no hidden document waiting in reserve. For the first time all night, none of that mattered, because my plan no longer needed any of it. The buyer's representatives took their seats near the closing table. Eleanor found a chair close to the stage. Denise stood across the room from me, near the operations office, close enough to see, far enough to still be deniable if she needed to be. Claire had her plan too, and I could read it from across the room, the way you read weather. Auction the car, sign the acquisition immediately after, announce her chair position before anyone had time to ask a second question, let my divorce carry any lingering doubt about the hero's authenticity straight out the door with me. I didn't tell her mine. I simply found Pharaoh again and said quietly, "Before you close, ask who guarantees the hero." Pharaoh did exactly that, in front of the closing table, in front of cameras that had drifted back over once word spread that the centerpiece lot had been delayed once already tonight. Does Reed Heritage Motors guarantee that the vehicle on that stage is materially the vehicle described in its catalog history? Yes, Claire said, without a flicker of hesitation, because hesitation had never once cost her anything before. I said nothing. I let the silence do what silence does. She read my quiet as a challenge to her composure instead of what it actually was, and pride decided her next move for her. She took the microphone from the host's hand herself. "I will guarantee it personally," she announced, and the room turned fully toward the stage now. Collectors and cameras and craftsmen alike. Every eye fixed on a car that had, until an hour ago, been headline news for entirely different reasons. I asked, simply, for the passenger side frame panel to be exposed long enough for Eleanor to examine one specific restoration mark. Not a teardown, not theater, I told myself, though Claire didn't see it that way. "You're creating a spectacle," she said. "You gave me divorce papers beside my birthday cake," I said. "I think theater already found us tonight." I didn't say it for the room. Nobody applauded. That mattered more than if they had. Claire reached for the old certificate one more time, reminding the room that the man now questioning the hero's authenticity had once certified a flawed vehicle himself. "Yes," I said. "I did." That single word cost her more than anything I could have argued. She had expected me to dodge it, the way I'd dodged it for a year. I told the room the truth, plainly, without asking anyone to forgive me for it. I signed that old certificate before finishing the final inspection. Claire had warned me a delay could threaten payroll before the holidays. I chose to sign anyway. I was wrong, and I had spent a year letting that wrongness get mistaken for something nobler than it was. Nobody cheered. Nobody applauded that either. People simply listened, which was stronger than either. Claire's strongest weapon had just gone quiet in her hands, and I watched her feel it happen. She pivoted toward motive instead of history. "He's trying to punish me for leaving him," she told the room. "That's what tonight actually is." "You can leave me," I said. "You cannot make that car become something it isn't." The buyer's representative formally requested the limited inspection before any closing could proceed. Claire faced a choice with no comfortable exit left in it. Refuse and threaten the entire acquisition in front of the people funding it. Agree and risk that I was right. Her flaw decided it for her, the same way mine had decided things for me all night. "Open it," she said. Claire still controlled the stage, the company, the security detail, and every piece of paperwork sitting on that closing table. I controlled exactly two things: what I knew and my willingness to finally say it in front of people who could do something about it. The crew raised the Harrow high enough to expose the passenger side frame. I didn't touch it first. I asked Eleanor to look. She crouched, studied the metal under the work light someone had wheeled over, and straightened up slowly. "Clean metal," she said. "No crescent mark." That proves nothing, Claire said immediately. Amos Bell could have simply missed the mark on this particular vehicle. Malcolm's entire accusation rests on sentimental folklore about a dead man's habits. Some of the collectors nodded along with that. She wasn't wrong that folklore alone wouldn't hold up, and I hadn't expected it to. The first reveal was never supposed to end this. I opened my hand and showed Eleanor the brass punch itself, the small crescent chip worn into its striking face. "Show them where he placed it," I said, "and why." Eleanor described it to the room the way she had described it to me at the champagne table, the exact tab location, the reason Amos left it, the surviving photographs from the original restoration that showed the mark sitting precisely where it should have been and wasn't now. It was consistent. It was documented. It still wasn't enough on its own to prove who had erased it or when. I turned to Denise. "Did that car leave secure storage after my certification?" The room went quiet in a different way than it had for the divorce papers. This silence had weight to it. Claire looked at her sister-in-law with an expression I hadn't seen from her all night. Not composure, something closer to a warning. Denise knew exactly what her answer would cost her. "Yes," she said. "It left storage 5 months ago, for what was logged as a branding session. Claire personally authorized the movement." Claire moved fast. "She accessed those records without authorization. She's protecting her brother, and the board should discount anything she says tonight." I didn't defend Denise's motives. I didn't need to. Her reasons don't change the metal underneath that car, I said, and I turned the room's attention back to the one thing that couldn't be argued with a grievance. "Check the plate," I told Eleanor. She examined the attachment points around the vehicle identification plate, the old brass rectangle riveted into the frame decades earlier. The plate itself was original. Anyone could see that. But the tooling marks in the surrounding metal weren't from the same era at all. Clean, modern fastening work, the kind our shop hadn't used since before I'd certified this car the first time. "The plate belongs to the Harrow," Eleanor said, loud enough for the cameras near the stage to catch every word. "The frame beneath it does not." She didn't call it fraud. She didn't accuse anyone by name. She stated only what the metal told her. "The vehicle on this stage is not physically consistent with the Harrow 12 that Malcolm Reed originally authenticated." That was the whole of it. Simple enough to understand without a law degree or an engineering background. A number belonging to one car welded onto the frame of another. Claire reached for her last weapon, the same one that had worked once already tonight. "And if the car is wrong," she said, "so is the man who signed off on the original. He's not an innocent witness here. He's implicated." I let that land instead of flinching from it. "My signature proves I failed once," I said. "It doesn't prove I inspected this car after it left storage under your authorization. If my old negligence disqualifies me from standing here tonight, then let the board investigate me too. I won't fight that." I watched something go out of her when I said it. She had built her entire counterattack on the assumption that I would keep protecting my own name the way I'd protected it for a year. I wasn't doing that anymore. And without my cooperation, the weapon didn't fire. Desperate now, with the room's mood shifting fully away from her, Claire ordered the auctioneer to proceed with the sale regardless. "The discrepancy is cosmetic," she announced. "This sale continues." That was her mistake. and it was entirely her own. Farrow, standing near the closing table, shook her head once, decisively, and told her own people to stand down. No acquisition group closes a deal minutes after an independent authenticator has stated, on record, that the flagship asset isn't what its paperwork claims. Claire had just tried to force a signature past a truth the room had already heard. The buyer withdrew. I watched it happen on her face in real time. The exact moment she understood that the room she had spent the whole evening controlling wasn't hers anymore. She didn't shout. She didn't reach for the microphone again. She simply stood very still, the way people stand when the floor has already given way beneath them and there's nothing left to grab. Without the acquisition, the chair position Claire had built her entire night around simply stopped existing. The board, watching all of this unfold in real time, called an emergency session on the spot, triggered by her decision to push the sale forward after a verified authenticity failure. I didn't ask for her to be fired. I didn't ask for anything about her at all. "Pull the Harrow from sale," I told the board liaison standing near the stage. "Secure the workshop until the review is finished. That's what I'm asking for tonight. Nothing else." The vote came quickly, faster than these things usually move. Claire was suspended from executive authority, effective immediately, pending an independent review of the acquisition and the vehicle's history. Not convicted of anything, not ruined, just stopped, in the place where she had spent all night trying to guarantee she couldn't be. The ballroom clock reached midnight while the board's decision was still being read aloud. By then, Claire had lost the acquisition, the chair position, control of the company she had spent years building alongside me, her sister-in-law's institutional loyalty, and the room's trust in every word she'd say from that stage again. She hadn't lost the divorce. I want to be clear about that. The papers on the table earlier tonight were still exactly what they'd been when she handed them to me. She found me near the edge of the stage once the room had started to thin out, her emerald dress catching the last of the work lights, her composure finally fully gone. "Was destroying me worth it?" she asked. "I didn't ask you to sell the wrong car after you knew what it was," I said. "That choice was yours, same as mine was 6 years ago." She didn't have an answer for that. For the first time all night, neither did she try to find one. The independent review started the following week. The Harrow stayed exactly where the board had put it, off the market, under seal, waiting for people with no stake in either of us to finish asking their questions properly this time. I didn't become chief executive. I want to say that plainly because it would have been the easy ending, the one that lets a man collect every reward on the same night he finally tells the truth. That isn't what happened. The board asked me to temporarily oversee workshop integrity while an outside executive took over daily operations during the transition. I accepted, but only under transparent inspection rules, the kind that would have caught what happened to the Harrow years before it ever reached a stage. I didn't want authority handed to me the same way Claire had once taken it. I wanted it earned, checked, and shared. Denise and I stood in the workshop a few nights later after most of the staff had gone home. The overhead lights hummed the way they always had, and for a moment it felt like nothing unusual had happened at all, except that everything had. "I still don't forgive you," she said. "For the year, I mean, not for tonight." "You shouldn't," I told her. "Not yet." Do you regret protecting her back then? I regret confusing protection with honesty, I said. I thought they were the same thing. They weren't. She didn't hug me. She didn't need to. She stood a little closer than she had at the gala. And for two people who'd spent a year barely speaking, that was its own kind of progress. We didn't finish anything that night. We started something, which is a different thing entirely, and maybe the more honest one. Claire left the gala alone, no entourage trailing behind her, her emerald coat folded over one arm, like she still had somewhere important to be. She didn't beg anyone for a different outcome. She didn't cause a second scene to match the first one. Whatever else could be said about my wife, she had never once lacked composure, even in the moment it stopped serving her. Before she reached the door, I watched her stop at the glass wall separating the ballroom from the workshop floor, and she stood there a long moment, looking in at the place she had helped build and had just lost the right to control. I don't know what she was thinking. I stopped assuming I know what Claire is thinking. That assumption cost both of us a great deal over the years. I signed the receipt acknowledging her divorce papers the next morning at my kitchen table, with coffee going cold beside the envelope. I didn't fight it. I didn't want to. Whatever we had built together, the marriage part of it had ended long before she slid that envelope across the table beside my birthday cake. She had simply chosen the moment and the witnesses. The truth about the company was a separate matter entirely, and I was relieved, honestly, to finally be able to treat them as two different things, instead of one tangled mess I kept avoiding. Back in the workshop a few days after that, I found myself holding Amos Bell's brass punch again, turning it over the way I had 100 times since the night of the gala. For years, I'd carried it in my pocket, like a kind of insurance, a private reminder of a standard I was afraid I'd stop living up to. This time, I didn't put it back in my pocket. I hung it on its old peg beside the workbench, where Amos used to keep it, where any craftsman walking through that shop could see it and ask what it was for. Amos used to tell me that truth belonged underneath the paint, hidden but present, honest even when nobody was looking. I think I misunderstood him for longer than I'd like to admit. Truth doesn't belong underneath anything. Not if you actually expect people to build something on top of it. I walked through the showroom on my way out that evening and switched off the lights row by row, past the glass cases and the polished chrome and the framed magazine covers celebrating deals I'd had very little to do with. The workshop stayed lit behind me, tools hung in their places, half-finished restorations waiting patiently under their canvas covers. Not the ballroom. Not the stage where all of this had nearly gone the way Claire needed it to go. The place where the real work happens. The independent review took the better part of 2 months to finish, and in that time I learned something I hadn't expected. Waiting honestly is a different thing entirely from waiting silently. I answered every question the auditors asked me, including the ones that made me look small. I didn't manage the story this time. I just told it. When the findings came back, they confirmed what Eleanor had already said out loud that night, in plainer language than any of us had used at the gala. The Harrow's frame had been substituted during that unscheduled movement, and the original components, the ones Amos Bell had actually put his hands on, were eventually located in a storage unit Claire had leased under a vendor's name. Nobody made a ceremony out of that discovery. I didn't ask to see it happen. Denise called me, told me quietly, and we let it sit there between us without either one of us needing to say anything triumphant about it. Reed Heritage Motors kept its name. That surprised some people. I understood the argument for changing it, for cutting away anything that still sounded like Claire. But a name isn't the thing that failed. A decision failed. Amos used to say, a shop's reputation lives in its habits, not its sign. And I finally believed him enough to leave the sign alone. The workshop staff didn't throw me a welcome back party, and I wouldn't have wanted one. What I got instead was smaller and better. A line of craftsmen who started leaving their own honest marks on hidden panels again, the way Amos had. The way I'd let myself forget how to do somewhere around the time I stopped trusting my own name. Nobody announced it. I just started noticing the small crescents and stars and initials tucked under trim pieces. Quiet signatures nobody outside that shop would ever see. That told me more about where the company actually stood than any board vote had. Denise took the operations role permanently, not the senior position the acquisition had once promised her, but the one that was actually hers to keep. We still don't talk about that year easily. Some Sundays we don't talk about it at all, and that's fine. Trust rebuilds in workshop hours, not birthday speeches. I think about Claire sometimes, mostly without anger by now. I hope she found work somewhere that rewards the parts of her that were genuinely good at building things, because there were parts like that, before certainty became the only voice she trusted. I don't know if she'll ever call the divorce a mercy. I've started to. Most nights now, I'm the last one to leave the shop, same as always, except I don't carry Amos's punch home with me anymore. It stays on its peg, where anyone can pick it up and understand exactly what it's for. So let me ask you something before you go. If the truth cost you your reputation before it ever cleared your name, would you still tell it first? And if you've ever watched somebody mistake control for leadership, in a marriage, a family business, anywhere, I'd like to hear how it ended for you. Tell me in the comments.